On the morning of the 5th of June of 1999 at 7:25 a.m., a UCI commissaire named Antonio Coccioni knocked on a hotel room door in the Italian Alps. Behind that door was the most famous cyclist in Italy. He was wearing the pink jersey of the Giro d'Italia. He was leading the race by more than 5 minutes, and he had one stage left to ride to Milan, and he was, by most measures, the most beloved sportsman in the country. 2 hours later, he would be on his way home. Excluded from the race, his career's in effect finished. He never tested positive for any banned substance, not that morning, not on any day of his career. What he failed was a health check, a blood test for one number, a number that even now, 27 years later, is still the subject of a criminal investigation in Italy. This is the story of the 1999 Giro d'Italia, of Marco Pantani, of the morning that ended his career, and of the open question that Italian prosecutors, Antimafia Commissions, and journalists have spent the better part of 2 decades trying to answer. Was Marco Pantani thrown out of the Giro because he was doping, or was he thrown out because someone needed him to lose? To understand what was at stake that morning in Madonna di Campiglio, you have to understand who Marco Pantani was and what he meant. Pantani came from Cesenatico, a fishing town on the Adriatic coast. He turned professional in 1992. He was small, slight, almost fragile looking off the bike. Bald by his mid-20s, he wore a bandana and a hoop earring, and the Italian press called him Il Pirata, the pirate. On the climb, he was a different creature entirely. He rode out of the saddle in a way that other climbers could not match, accelerating in short, explosive bursts that left his rivals staring at his back wheel. He did not pace himself up mountains, he attacked them. In October 1995, his career nearly ended. A car somehow got onto the route of the Milan-Turin race, and Pantani hit it on a fast descent. He broke his left leg badly. He spent months with an external frame screwed into his shin to stop the bone from healing too quickly. Doctors were not sure he would ride at the same level again. He came back in 1997. He took 2 stages of the Tour de France and finished 3rd overall. And then came 1998, the year that changed everything. In 1998, Pantani won the Giro d'Italia. 6 weeks later, he attacked Jan Ullrich on a freezing, rain-swept stage to the Les Deux Alpes and won the Tour de France. He became the first rider since Miguel Indurain in 1993 to win both Grand Tours in the same season. Only 8 men in the history of cycling have done it. In Italy, that summer, he was not just a cyclist. He was something larger, a national hero in a country that had not had one of those in a long time. The crowds at the roadside grew enormous. The television numbers were extraordinary. The pirate sold newspapers, sold magazines, sold everything. Which meant that in May of 1999, when the Giro d'Italia rolled out for its 82nd edition, Marco Pantani was not just the defending champion. He was the center of gravity for the entire race. 1999 Giro d'Italia started at Agrigento in Sicily on the 15th of May. 22 stages, around 3,800 kilometers, 3 weeks of racing. Pantani did not lead the race from the start. He took his time. He let the climbers and the time trialist specialists trade the pink jerseys through the early weeks, and then, in the high mountains, he did what Pantani did. The 2 stages that everyone remembers from that race before what happened next are Europa and Alpe di Pampiago. Europa was stage 15 on the 30th of May. Pantani had a mechanical at the foot of the climb. His chain came off. He stopped, lost contact with the front group, and watched 49 riders disappear up the road. By the time he was rolling again, he had to ride through every single one of them on a steep mountain. He passed them one by one like a man working through a list, and he won that stage. The Italian press called it La rimonta di secolo, the comeback of the century. Stage 19 was Alpe di Pampiago, 8 kilometers of 10% gradient with sections that touched 16. Pantani went there too, climbing in a way that almost didn't seem possible. By the morning of stage 20, the race was essentially over as a contest. Pantani led Paolo Sabodelli by 5 minutes and 38 seconds. He led Ivan Gotti by 6 minutes and 12 seconds. And he won stage 20 as well into Madonna di Campiglio, an alpine resort in the Dolomites where the riders would sleep that night before the second last stage of the race. The Giro was his. He had 2 days of riding left. The Maglia Rosa was on his shoulders, and his Mercato Uno team had booked rooms at the Hotel Touring. That is where the story turns. To understand what happened at the Hotel Touring, you have to understand what the test actually was. In 1999, professional cycling had a problem and a half solution. The problem was EPO, a drug that increased the body's production of red blood cells, allowing riders to carry more oxygen to their muscles, which made them faster, especially in the mountains. EPO had been everywhere in cycling since the early 1990s, and most observers, including most people inside the sport, believe it was widespread across the peloton through this entire era. The half solution was a test. The UCI could not test directly for EPO. The reliable test for that drug would not exist until 2000, so instead they used a proxy. They measured hematocrit, the proportion of a rider's blood made up of red blood cells. A normal hematocrit for a healthy adult man is somewhere between 40 and 50%. If a rider tested above 50%, the UCI assumed the body had been artificially boosted and the rider would be suspended for 15 days. Officially, it was not called a doping ban. It was called a health protection measure. The rider was deemed unfit to race for their own safety, but it was a blunt instrument. Some people have naturally high hematocrit. Conditions, dehydration, even altitude can change the number, and crucially, no positive test for any banned drug came with it. If you tested over 50, you were sent home for 2 weeks, but you were not officially a doper. This is a test that came knocking at 7:25 in the morning on the 5th of June of 1999. Coccioni and a UCI doctor named Eugenio Sala arrived at Pantani's room. They told him to be ready in about 10 minutes. They came back, drew his blood, sealed the tubes, and took the samples to a UCI hotel where the analysis would be done. The result came back at 52%. Some accounts put it at 51.9. Either way, it was above the limit. Pepe Martinelli, Pantani's director sportif, the man who had been with him through every comeback, was given the news first. He had to walk into the room and tell his rider. Pantani punched a window. He cut his hand badly. He was led out of the hotel through a crush of journalists and photographers, unshaven, his hand bleeding, his head down. He told the press around him that something strange was happening, that he had touched the bottom, that this time he was not sure he would get back up. Within hours, the Mercatone Uno team had withdrawn from the race in protest. The pink jersey passed to Ivan Gotti, who would go on to win the Giro. But here is the part that has kept this story alive for 27 years. Pantani's team said his own centrifuge had read 48% the night before the test. A few hours after his exclusion at a hospital in Imola, his blood was tested again. The results came back at 47.6 and 48.1. The threshold was 50. The morning test was 52. You cannot get a useful figure from comparing those numbers cleanly. Hematocrit moves, but 4 points of swing in either direction in one morning is unusual enough that it kept people asking questions. And then slowly, over the following years, other people started asking questions too. This is the chapter where the story stops being just about cycling. The first person to publicly suggest that the Camorra, the organized crime network based around Naples, had something to do with Pantani's exclusion was a man named Renato Vallanzasca. Vallanzasca is one of the most notorious criminals in modern Italian history, a bank robber and convicted murderer serving multiple life sentences. He is not a source you would normally build a case on. But in a 2004 book, and then again on Italian television in 2014, Vallanzasca told the same story. He said that while he was in prison in Milan in May of 1999, another inmate gave him a piece of advice. The inmate told him to bet his life savings against Pantani winning the Giro, to bet on a rival, because the defending champion, he was told, would not finish the race. For a long time, this was a curiosity, a wild claim from a man with a long criminal record. Italian journalists wrote about it, but nothing official came of it. Then, in 2014, the case began to move. Italian prosecutors in the city of Forlì, near Pantani's hometown, opened a serious investigation. Their working theory was that the Camorra had been running an enormous illegal betting operation on the Giro that year, and that the operation had gone wrong. Too much money had been bet on Pantani's rivals. If Pantani won, the clan running the book would lose so much money that it would face collapse. In the years that followed, more witnesses came forward. The most important of them was Augusto Latorre, a former Camorra boss from the Mondrago, who had become a state witness in 2003. Latorre told investigators that while he was being held in prison, 3 other senior Camorra figures had told him directly that Pantani's exclusion had been arranged by Naples clans. The reason, Latorre said, was the same one that Vallanzasca had hinted at. If Pantani won, the betting bank would collapse, and the Camorra would lose billions of lire in illegal payouts. According to the Forlì investigation, police also obtained a phone intercept of a Camorra member that they say supported the central claim. And they reported being told by senior figures in the Naples underworld that medical staff at the test in Madonna di Campiglio had been bribed. The technical method they described involved a procedure called deplasmation, a way of removing plasma from a sample to artificially raise the hematocrit reading. Now, here's the careful part. The Forlì investigation did not produce a criminal conviction. Italian magistrate eventually closed that file without bringing the case to a court verdict, but the file did not stay closed. In 2018, the Italian Parliament's Antimafia Commission, a body of the Italian Senate, opened its own hearings on the case. A senator who led the work said publicly that the theory of mafia involvement remained an open question that the commission was not closing. In its later report, the commission stated that the morning blood tests in Madonna di Campiglio had been carried out, in its view, with what it called numerous and grave violations of the rules that were meant to govern it. In 2024, the prosecutor's office in Trento, the Italian region where Madonna di Campiglio sits, formally reopened the investigation into the 1999 test. The new file is built around the betting network theory. It is, as of this video being made, still officially opened. Now, none of this proves what happened. The Antimafia Commission itself was clear that the evidence it had seen was not enough to fully explain either Pantani's disqualification or what happened to him afterwards. The witnesses are who they are: Camorra bosses, convicted criminals, state collaborators who have their own reasons to talk. But here is what makes this more than just a conspiracy theory. The morning test was, by any honest reading of the rules at the time, irregular. The numbers from before and after do not line up cleanly with the morning result. The financial motive, if the betting allegations are true, is real and significant. And serious Italian institutions, prosecutors, police, and the Antimafia Commission of the Italian Parliament itself have all taken the question seriously enough to investigate it. That is not nothing. But to talk honestly about Pantani, you have to put 2 facts next to each other. The first fact is that Marco Pantani never tested positive for a banned substance. Not at the 1999 Giro, not at any other point in his professional career. The hematocrit reading at Madonna di Campiglio was not a doping test, it was a health check. There is, on his official record, no failed anti-doping test. The second fact is that he raced through what is now widely accepted as the most heavily doped era in the history of our sport. EPO was endemic. Writers who later admitted to doping have described the period as one in which staying clean and competing was for most of the peloton essentially impossible. Several investigations after Pantani's career suggested that his blood values across multiple races were consistent with EPO use. He himself was implicated in later judicial inquiries into doping in cycling, although he was also never convicted. These two facts are not in conflict. They sit together uncomfortably. They describe a man who rode in a corrupted era, who is almost certainly part of the system that corrupted it, and who, on the morning of the 5th of June of 1999, was removed from a race he was about to win on the basis of a test that, even on its own terms, may not have been carried out properly. The argument here is not that Pantani was clean. Almost no one in the sport who has looked at the record believes he was. The argument is simpler and harder. It is that the test that ended his career may have been faked. And those are two different things. You can believe at the same time that Pantani was probably using EPO, that the sport was rotten, and that a specific morning in a specific hotel with a specific test result was not actually about catching a doper. It was about removing the man who was going to win the race. If both those things are true, what we are looking at is not a story about cheating being punished. It is a story about a champion being made an example of for the wrong reasons in a sport that was, at every level above him, looking the other way. Pantani never recovered, as a rider or as a person. He came back to professional racing in 2000. He even won a stage of that year's Tour de France on Mont Ventoux in a duel with Lance Armstrong. This is actually my first memory of cycling. But the man on the bike was not quite the same. The attacks were shorter, the recoveries were longer, the press conferences were harder for him. He stopped trusting people. Friends from the sport said the events of Madonna di Campiglio had broken something inside him that did not heal. He spoke often about the morning at the hotel touring, about the test, about not understanding what had happened to him. He felt, his family and friends said, that he had been the target of something he could not see. The Italian press cycled through other doping stories, and his name kept appearing in them, and he kept saying he had never tested positive, and the conversation never moved forward. He withdrew, he missed races, he missed training camps, and in the early 2000s he developed a serious cocaine addiction. He spent time in clinics, he attempted treatment more than once, but on 14th of February 2004, in a hotel room in Rimini called Résidence Le Rose, Marco Pantani was found dead. He was 34 years old. The official cause was a cocaine overdose, but he was alone. His funeral in Cesenatico drew thousands. Italy, the country that had crowned him 5.5 years earlier, mourned him in a way that revealed how much of itself it had invested in him. The grief was disproportionate to his cycling career. It always is with him. The investigation into his death was reopened more than once. Some of his family and supporters have always maintained that the circumstances of his last hours do not add up. Italian courts have more than once examined those theories, and as of now, the official cause of death remains what it was first ruled, a cocaine overdose, alone in a hotel room on Valentine's Day. The hardest stories in sport are the ones that do not resolve. The 1999 Giro is one of those. We know what the official record says. Pantani was excluded because his hematocrit was above the limit. The rules of the sport at the time allowed the UCI to do that. The race went on without him. Ivan Gotti won. The result book is closed. We also know now, with reasonable confidence, the following things. That Pantani rode in an era saturated with EPO, that he was probably using it, that on the morning of his exclusion, the test that ended his career was carried out with what an Italian Senate commission has called numerous and grave irregularities. That former members of the Camorra have testified more than once that they arranged his removal from the race to protect an illegal betting book. We know that an Italian prosecutor reopened the case in 2024 and that it is open today. What we do not know, and may never know with certainty, is the truth of the morning itself. Whether the result that came back was a real number from Pantani's body or a faked number from a tampered sample. Whether the man who was let out of the hotel touring with a bleeding hand was a cheat caught in the act or a champion sold out by a system more powerful than him. Both could be true. That is the part that does not sit easily with me. What is harder to argue with is what happened to the man afterwards. Whatever the test showed, the response of the sport and the country and his own mind broke him. The 5 years between Madonna di Campiglio and Rimini are the part of the story that is not in dispute. He never raced the same way again. He never trusted the same again. And he died alone in a hotel room on a Saturday afternoon in February at an age when most of his rivals were still racing. In Italy, Pantani is not remembered the way doping-era champions are usually remembered in other countries. The statues are not coming down, the murals are still being painted. The Giro d'Italia goes back to the climbs where he made his name every few years, and the broadcasters show his footage and the crowds still gather in pink. There is a museum to him in Cincinnati that draws tens of thousands of visitors every year. Some of that is denial. Some of it is genuine fondness for a rider whose racing felt, even at the time, like something Italy had been waiting for. And some of it is the country slowly, quietly deciding that whatever Marco Pantani did or did not do, he was not the only person being dishonest in the room that morning. The question that I keep coming back to with this story is not whether Pantani was a doper. I think the answer to that is, on the balance of evidence, probably yes. The question is whether that fact is the only thing that matters about what happened to him. And I do not think it is. I think you can hold both ideas at once, that he was part of a corrupted system and that the way the system chose to deal with him on one specific morning in 1999 may not have been honest either. I would like to hear what you think. Tell me in the comments, and if you've got something out of this, subscribe and hit the like button. It makes a real difference for a channel our size. For more cycling stories, head to domestiquecycling.com. The link is in the description. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.